This is Pivot Perspectives with Chris O'Byrne, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on their road to success, and get exclusive access on how to implement their success into your life and business. Pivot Perspectives is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Chris O'Byrne.
All right. Well, good morning and welcome, Jason. So glad to have you here and to talk about your story.
Always fun to be with good old Chris O'Byrne and shoot the you-know-what here and there, right?
That's right. I always love it. Oh, man. So there's so much to cover. But let's go back to where, because I want to talk about your business growth and what's brought you to where you're at now. But it really does start on a little tiny farm in northwest or northeastern Montana. So why don't you tell me a little bit about where you grew up and how that affected the rest of your life?
Yeah. So I grew up in a little town of a couple hundred, Fairview, Montana. And, I just grew up a farm kid. That's how I grew up. And there was a lot of lessons in that, hard work and, a seed, right? You can't rush a seed. So you put a seed in the ground, it's going to grow and it's going to grow. And that's one thing that I really learned from that childhood experience on the farm is, today people don't view it that way. Everybody wants stuff right now, right? So, but how I grew up as a kid, there was no right now, right? Everything was the toil of the farm. You planted, it went through its season, and then you harvested. You couldn't rush that process. And I took a lot of that from my parents because my parents were both very entrepreneurial. My mom she owned a clothing store in town. She owned a restaurant in town. She owned a video shop in town. So, and then my dad, he was an entrepreneur. He was a farmer. And my father was a Vietnam vet, and he always just considered himself non-employable anywhere else. So, he came back. He grew up on a farm, and his farm was literally like a half a mile from where he grew up. So my whole family very co-located that way. But yeah, there was a lot of lessons in growing up that way. Too many to even discuss here, but that journey itself really taught me a lot, not just about business, but about life.
So you come from kind of a long line of military people. Your dad was in Vietnam. I believe your grandfather also served. Is that what drove you to join the military?
Yeah, the family tradition of things. We got a very long lineage on my mom and on my dad's side of, combat fighters and service to country and all that kind of stuff. And all those are drivers, right? In a very big way. Because you look at, and this, I'm not trying to put veterans on a pedestal or anything, but if you look at a veteran-owned business versus a non-veteran owned business, you'll see some very specific differences in them, for sure. And they vary, obviously. It's like anything else. There's veteran businesses out there that don't run very smoothly too, but I'm just saying overall, when you've been through all those pressure situations in your life, in the military, it brings a little different dynamic to business. And that would be just the point I would want to get across there is it's not about somebody's better than somebody else. It's just a little different dynamic. That's all.
So, and we'll cover a little bit more about your military service, but where in this mix did you become the entrepreneur? When did you start your first business?
Yeah, so, I got into, there was a lot of failures for sure. a ton of failures. And I remember this would have been, I don't know, like 1997 or something, right? I was watching an infomercial, right? And it was about this system that you could buy, right? You know, the thud marketing.
Oh yeah.
You buy it, you get a box, and they drop it, and it goes thud, and there's so much crap in it, you can't even.
The louder the thud, the better it must be.
Right? Yeah, for sure. But anyway, it was this system of uh, like main events in your life for reminders, right? So you could sell these little booklets, right? And then people would put like all their dates that they wanted to be reminded of something in their life, right? So you'd sell this as a system, and they would fill it out, and then say it was their mother's birthday. 2 days before the birthday, they would get a card in the mail that says, hey, don't forget it's your mom's birthday in 2 days, right? Which obviously that's completely obsolete now with calendars and all that kind of stuff. But then there was no computers, none of that really existed then. So, but that was like a massive, massive failure. I mean, it was awful. It was terrible. And it's not like I lost a lot of money in it or anything. That wasn't really the point. The point is it was my very first taste of failure, right? Because I'd never really failed at anything in life on a what I considered a big scale at that point in my life. Because, you know, everything as a kid, would say I was average at pretty much everything. And, you know, I wasn't a good student or anything by any means. And, you know, but I didn't fail at things either. And then I joined the military and just excelled. And from there, and then while I was in, I had that first failure. And it just really kicked me in the nuts. It really did. And it just, that feeling was so horrible to like really fail at something. It wasn't a money thing. It was just about the fact that I couldn't get people to buy into this idea that I had of how great it was, right? And that was one of the first businesses I ever started. And then later, there was many other little things that I'd done that led to kind of one of the first successes that I had, and that was with, you know, the framing of the custom sports memorabilia frames, which you saw when you were here at my house. And that turned into a pretty neat little company. And, you know, it was unique, very unique, and it still exists today. And it's just a great little company. But there were all those little failures with that along the way too. And, you know, one of the unique things that I got into too, that really kind of started to build that institutional knowledge in my head earlier there. What I really attribute to the success I've had today is I started, so the internet become prominent with the websites and e-commerce and all that stuff. And so I started buying these little crappy little website businesses, and then I would, you know, get them doing a little better and then flip them around. And it's not like it was a ton of money in it, but the point is I learned the operational space of business, right? And I learned how to really take the military operational experience and kind of couple it and plug it in there, which is exactly the same system I use today. So I got to refine it through all those little test pilots, right? And over years and years, right? And I figured out that formula, that little 8 or 9 step formula that you take every business through, and create that trinity of success, is what I call it, around that business. And it just works. So, my first businesses were complete flops, I would say. But what I learned from that was priceless, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Just having your own system,
Mm-hmm.
pulling from all your failures, pulling from your success in the military, putting it together, and then testing that over. And I'm sure you're still refining that. When you go back to look at your first success, what do you attribute that success to? What made that one a success? Was it just pure luck that you stumbled onto the right thing, which so many people are hoping to do? Or what was it that you had learned that you were able to make this one a success?
Pure grit of getting past where everybody else quit and breaking that first barrier across from employee mindset to, because remember, I was an employee still, right? So I was in the military, so I was employed, right? And so it was breaking across that barrier of failure, where most people go, then failure, I can't do this anymore, right? For me, it was fail. And that's where I learned just keep failing fast, right? Just keep failing fast over and over and over and over and over again. And eventually you're going to hit, right?
So a lot of testing.
A lot of testing. So I call them micro pivots now, right? That's the word I use today, is just micro pivoting. It's like, you're up on the disco floor, right?
I'd like to see that sometime.
No, absolutely not. But that's the difference, though, is a lot of people, they have this idea that they want to be entrepreneurial, right? And I truly believe that the human race was designed to be entrepreneurs, right? We just got spoiled, right?
Yeah.
Because go back to the caveman. You had to hunt, right? You had to protect. You had to do all these things. You were a freaking entrepreneur, right? Otherwise, if you weren't going to eat, so you were going to die. You couldn't protect your family. You couldn't do all these things. We were born very entrepreneurial to work on our own. Mr. Caveman then was the CEO of his tribe, right?
Yeah.
And what he failed to do would shape the course of the tribe, right? It's no different today in business, right? It's just now we're lazy and we don't have to. We forage by going to the grocery store and sliding a credit card, right?
Yes. Right. While we work for someone else.
Right. Pretty much. So, if a lot of people could just get back to the core of who we are and try to put themselves in that monkey brain a little bit again, right? You can kind of draw some of that from that, for sure. That might sound really weird, but it's true.
No, it does. It makes sense. I've been reading the Laura Ingalls Wilder series to my daughter, and as I'm reading it, I'm seeing it through this whole new lens of, wow, her pa was an entrepreneur. He was farming and hunting and selling what he could and trying new things, and he'd go try to get some land and make a farm on that, and that wouldn't work, so then he'd move somewhere else. Then he tried working in a hotel, and it was one pivot after another. It was so entrepreneurial. It was, and it was grit. We talk about, the pioneers and the resilience and grit that it took them. Well, it wasn't just the grit to stay alive. It was the grit they needed to make money. They needed to make a living, and they were constantly trying and doing whatever they could to make that work. And you're right, we are spoiled. I see it all the time. People just aren't willing to keep at it, and like, well, I'll just go work at Walmart and collect food stamps or whatever concessions they make to the easy life.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because if I, years and years and years ago, people used to ask me, what do you want to do? What do you want to do when you grow up? Right. And I could never answer that. So I used to always say, I just want to be a Walmart greeter. Right. Where now somebody asks me that question, I just say, I don't know. I'll let you know when I actually grow up.
Much better answer.
Because I don't really ever want to grow up, right? I don't have or people say, well, what's your end game? I don't know, because I don't want to have one, right? If I have an actual end game, right? Or what is the saying? The destination, right? Because all of our destinations are death, and I don't want to think that far ahead. Right? So, because there's only two things for sure in life, and that's death and taxes. So, so when you look at that, I don't want to arrive ever, right?
Yeah.
I just want to stay on the journey all the time, because being on the journey is exciting. It's fun. And to me, that's what's most important.
So there are other pieces of your military life that contributed to your business success. One is grit and determination. The other is the operational side of things that you learned, and I'm sure you continue to learn much more as you rose in the ranks. But you also learned something about choosing and refining your target. So tell me a little bit about what you actually did in the military, and then how your role as a sniper played into more of your business success today.
Yeah. So, when I joined the military, my father, he said, be a truck driver, do something that is a skill that you can relate outside. So I went to MAPS and did the military entrance processing station, for those that don't know what that is. And I did the physical, did breeze through that, the test, the written test, thought I breezed through that, right? And so I sit in the chair next to the counselor, and he goes, what do you want to do, son? And I said, all I want to do is be a truck driver. And he said, you're too dumb for that. I said, okay, well, what can I do? He said, well, you can be an infantryman. And I was like, okay, that is not what my father told me to do, right? Because my father was in Vietnam too. But I didn't really have any choice. And I didn't know that there was this whole setup behind all this stuff. Later on, obviously, I found out my scores were high enough I could have been in military intelligence, which is an oxymoron anyway. But but my scores were way high enough. But you know what? I don't regret that moment, because I went into a world that was very, very hardcore, right? And it just battle hardened you in a very big way, not just for the military part, but for life experiences, right? And I mean, if I told some of my stories of my beginnings, my military service, most people would be like, how did that even happen? Because today it wouldn't even be acceptable, right? But that's what really made that hardcore grit inside of me, right? And then, being in all those different leadership positions, and, I was a reconnaissance guy, A big chunk of my career I spent as a sniper, and those things taught me patience, right? Because you'd have to sit there on the glass for hours at a time looking through the scope, right? Patience, and sometimes you just gotta wait, right? You gotta wait. Everything isn't just right now. And I took a lot of that from that experience being a sniper, and then rose all the way up the ranks to retiring as a first sergeant, infantry first sergeant, and being exposed to all the different levels of management, right, per se, helped me learn about people and how to leverage people in the right way, how to make collaboration, how to, get people to do things that need to be done through providing purpose, direction, and motivation, right? And those are the things that I took into what I do today with, like just for instance, the strategic advisory board. Very highly collaborated, right? Lots of joint venture partnerships, all these things come together. And all of that, I took that from pushing troops, right? It was just a different environment. That's all. Today, we just don't have bullets. We have laptops. So
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I could throw a laptop at somebody if I had to.
Whack them in the head with it. So so how long were you in the military and when did you get out? And how many businesses did you have by the time you got out?
So I retired at the end of 2016 is when I retired. I served 23 years total. And I had already started the first brand of SAB, what SAB is today, before I even left uniform. So I'd started that before I even took the uniform off. I'd already written 2 books at that point. You republished them.
Yep.
So I had already written 2 books before I left the military, which is where I tied all that operational experience in to, I think the first one was called Combat Boots to Internet Entrepreneur, right? Because I was doing a lot of the things I was doing on the internet because it's the only place I could really do things, right? Owning like a hard stand business wasn't really an option at that point in the military. And that's why the like flipping thing worked really well with internet business stuff, right? So there was a lot of them, quite a few of them. And, then I started like compressing down the businesses that I really thought I could really amp up in the next 10 to 15 years. Because my exit plan was always at 50. That was the goal. So was to exit at 50. Well, we're almost there and getting closer. And
Yeah.
I'll hit that goal. I think we'll be pretty close anyway to where I can just exit all the things I'm doing and really be able to spend a lot more quality time with family and things like that. And because goals are subjective, everybody has different ones. So is success is subjective, all of those things. But no matter what in life, people will say not about the money. It's always about the money, right?
Yeah.
To say it's not is ridiculous because everything we do in our life, whether it is just living or the things we want to do, or we want to do philanthropy work, it all takes money to do it. So unless you're going to live in a van down by the river.
And even that takes money. You got to pay for gas.
That's right. So hopefully I answered that question, but
You did. Now, I have a leading question for you. What's that stack of books beside you?
that's all my books right there. Which
Every single one, international bestseller.
yep, all 13 of them. I think there's 12 in the pile there, but I think it's 13 total with the Rogue book we just pushed.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah.
So that's been part of your plan too, is becoming not just behind the scenes building up a business or businesses, but stepping out of your comfort zone a bit and becoming more influential, which included doing these books. It includes, well, you have an award-winning podcast out, and podcasts that you're doing. You write for Forbes and Entrepreneur, and you've been doing a whole lot of things. How does that tie into and help what you're trying to do with the Strategic Advisor Board, SAB?
Yeah. So let me back up to 2016, and I never wanted to be that person, ever. That was never my goal. My goal was not to be sprayed all over social media, any of that stuff. I always just wanted to be the guy behind the chair, right? The guy behind the chair that said, hey, business owner, let me help you maneuver your way through this path because I've been here and I have a specific skill to help you do that. I have a very specific skill that I can help you do that. A very specific set of skills to help people guide through that. And being able to do all that was very, very important. And I didn't want to be in the limelight at all. I wanted to be the person behind the scenes that said, look, you take all the credit for this, right? I'll help you through the waters. I don't want any credit for it. You be the hero of your company, right? Well, I started to realize years later after doing that with, probably well over 100 businesses, is that, I'm not even paying attention to my own very well, right? And getting it global, to be more of a global powerhouse, right? So that's why I then formed what is now the Strategic Advisor Board out of that, and, position myself with a company that's now extremely global, right? And I knew I had to get out of my own comfort zone and be able to share the experience, right? Because that experience is what is the draw to bring people in, right? And I have plenty of experience, but now I also have 9 other people around me that have a lot of experience too in their own right. But as the CEO of the company, it's up to me to be the face, right? I have to be the one that's out there in the social media limelight. Why? Because that's just where we are today. You either do it or you're probably going to die at some point. And because it's our ideal client today is changing rapidly. And that ideal client today is not you and I. It's the millennial group and the Gen Z group, right? And where are they? Social media, that's where they are. So I made that pretty massive transition about 2.5 years ago. That's it. It was only a couple of years ago. when I made that transition to really starting to put myself out there. And really probably the last year and a half, like really putting myself out there. And, it's done a lot from an influencer standpoint, but it's great because I get to affect people in a different way, so.
Yeah, yeah. Can you briefly, because I know one of the pieces of how you help businesses grow massively is the Trinity model. Can you briefly talk about that?
Yeah, so I believe in the Trinity. The Trinity is the triangle is it's the strongest shape in nature. And so I plan everything in business around that Trinity. So, and I always look at it in the way of it's within everything I do. If it's not 3 wins, I don't do it, right? So there always has to be 3 wins, whether it's working with JV partners, whatever the case may be, and planning your entire business structure around that Trinity. So because around that Trinity now, you have 3 legs. Those 3 legs should be the 3 pathways of income that come into your company. And that's where a lot of companies fail, is because they only have 1, right? But you should have 3, and then off of those, you should have 3 passive forms of income off of those legs, right? So that's how you create generational wealth, right? And I think we should all be working towards that, the generational wealth side for sure. But the Trinity of success it's based off of all those failures, and it's also based off of that military operational model.
I see the next book that we need, the legacy book, your book that includes that piece. I've been envisioning that for a little while now, but that's a talk for another day. The Strategic Advisor Board, how do people take advantage of that? How do people leverage what you've done with that to build their own business and to build their own generational wealth?
Yeah, it's more the advisory piece of things, right? So, and it's like I always tell people, you have to surround yourself with people that they don't have to have arrived, right? Because I don't believe in arriving actually, but people that they've walked in some of those shoes, right? Why reinvent the wheel, right? Why take the arrows in the back? Look, I've taken a lot of arrows in the back. So
a lot of bullets.
Well, maybe some of those too, probably. But the point is don't try to do it yourself, right? I watch these because I'm part of Boulder Startup Week, and I watch these new, founders. They just try to do it all themselves, and that's why they fail. Surround yourself with a couple good advisors, right? And that's one of the things that SAB provides is an advisor board, right, for your business. And if you do that, you reduce the arrows, right? And that's what's key. Reduce the arrows. You're always going to take some arrows no matter what. You know what? Because life isn't perfect, and neither is business. I don't care what you do. You rip the curtain open beyond any business, and you're going to find some messes no matter what. We have our own, right? So we all have our own messes but the point is we keep moving forward, right? And we do have those people like you met Don, my neighbor, right?
Yeah.
We have people like Don in our lives that have I mean, walked some really heavy shoes in the business world. And when Don speaks about something, he's speaking from, massive experience. And I take a lot of that to heart when he gives me some advice. And those are the relationships that are priceless, and we consider Don a part of our family, right? He comes over and he does pancakes with the kids and all these things. But so he's a really great friend, but he's also a really good mentor. And I've taken a lot from that relationship, from the friend and mentorship side. And I highly appreciate that. And we all need a little bit of that in our life. The outside influence, right? That outside influence that has that sage advice, for sure. So, and that's what we provide for, young business owners. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes you're 50 years old running a business and you're just stuck in your ways, and you need somebody to just come in and kick you in the head and go, look, just because this is the way you've always been doing it doesn't make it the way you should be doing it today. Right? So, yeah.
So if people want to learn more about you and learn how they can learn from you, where do you like to send them?
Very easy. If you're a Googler, Jason Miller, Strategic Advisor Board. Everything will come up. So, or strategicadvisorboard.com. Either way. Or
Perfect.
you can see a lot of my other things all over social media. It's everywhere. It's pretty easy to find.
Great, because I know people are going to be interested. Well, thanks for coming on, giving us some of your life story and your business life, and then even sharing some, like useful tips. A lot of valuable information people can get from this to get things going on their own, and to know that they can come to you when they're ready for that next step. So I appreciate you and your time.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks for listening to Pivot Perspectives with your host, Chris O'Byrne. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advice on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.